It started with something so small I almost didn't keep it. Not in memory, not as something worth remembering. Just a sentence that passed through the room and should have disappeared with everything else. You should take your pills with breakfast instead. She didn't say it loudly. She didn't even look at me directly when she said it. That was the first thing that mattered, because if she had looked at me, it would have felt like advice. If she had insisted, it would have felt like correction. But she didn't. She said it the way people say things they assume are already true, like she was reminding me of something I had forgotten. I was standing by the sink at the time. The glass was already in my hand, half full, the water still moving slightly from where I had just filled it. I remember that detail clearly now. Because I stopped, not completely, just enough, the kind of pause you don't notice unless you're paying attention. "What?" I asked, not because I didn't hear her. Because I wanted to understand the tone. She was sitting at the table, her phone in front of her, not using it, just resting her hand near it. "You should take your pills with breakfast," she repeated. Same tone, same softness. No change. I looked at her for a second, then at the pills in my hand, then back at the glass. "I've always done it like this," I said. The sentence came out automatically. Not defensive, not even intentional, just factual, because that's what routines are, facts you don't think about. She nodded immediately. "I know." And that's when something shifted, not in what she said, in what she didn't say. She didn't stop there. She didn't say, "Then keep doing it." She didn't say, "It doesn't matter." She said something else. "It's just more consistent the other way." Consistent, the word stayed. Not because it meant anything clear, because it didn't. Consistent with what? With who? With when? But it sounded right. That was the problem. It sounded like something that made sense. Something you don't question because it feels like it belongs somewhere. I looked at the pills again, still in my hand, still where they had been. Nothing had changed. Except now there was another option, another version of the same moment, and that version hadn't existed before. I swallowed the pills, the same way I always did, water first, then coffee after. Same order, same timing, nothing different, except I was aware of it. I was aware of the order, the sequence, the steps, that had never required attention before. I placed the glass in the sink. Turned slightly, and for a moment I thought about saying something else, something to close the moment, something like "It's fine." But I didn't, because she didn't ask, she just watched. Not directly, not in a way that would make you uncomfortable, just present, like she was waiting to see something. Later that morning it came back, not as a thought, not exactly, more like a trace. I was sitting in the living room, my phone resting on my leg, scrolling through something I wasn't really reading. And suddenly, without context, without reason, the sentence was there again. "You should take your pills with breakfast instead." Same wording, same tone, and this time it stayed a little longer, not because I agreed with it, because I noticed it, because it had repeated. I put the phone down, looked toward the kitchen, as if something there would explain it, but nothing had changed. Everything was exactly where it should be, exactly how it always was. Except now, there was a version of my routine that didn't match mine, and I hadn't created it. That afternoon, she mentioned it again. Not directly, not as a correction. Just placed inside another sentence. "Did you take your pills with breakfast today?" The wording was precise. Not "Did you take your pills?" Not "Did you remember?" With breakfast. I looked at her, because now that part mattered. "No," I said. "I took them earlier." She nodded, again. I know, always the same answer, always that same small acknowledgement. And then, "You should really try it that way." Not insistence, not pressure, just repetition. That was the moment it changed. Not visibly, not in anything I did, but in how it existed. It wasn't just a suggestion anymore. It was something that returned. Something that positioned itself inside the same moment again and again. The next morning I went into the kitchen. Same time, same light, same silence, everything exactly as before. I opened the cabinet, took out the pills, placed them on the counter, reached for the glass, filled it, watched the water settle, and then I stopped. Not because I forgot what to do. Because I thought about it, for the first time. I looked at the counter, at the empty space where my plate would be if I had made breakfast first, then at the pills, then at the glass. And for a moment, I wasn't sure, not about what I usually did, about what I should do, and that difference had never existed before. I stood there longer than necessary. Long enough for the routine to feel like a choice, long enough for the sequence to feel uncertain. And that's when I realized something. The routine hadn't changed, I had. Or more precisely, the way I saw it had. Because now there were two versions, mine and hers. And for the first time, I wasn't sure which one I had always followed. I picked up the pills, held them in my hand, and instead of moving immediately, I hesitated, just for a second. But that second mattered, because routines don't hesitate. They move, automatically, without question. Without pause, and now there was a pause, small, quiet, but real. And that pause was the first real change. The hesitation didn't disappear. That was the first thing I noticed the next morning. Not the suggestion, not her voice, not even the memory of what she had said. The hesitation. Because once something interrupts a routine, even slightly, it doesn't go back to the way it was. It stays. Not visible, not obvious, just present. I stood in the kitchen again the same way I had the day before. Same position. Same light coming through the window, same quiet. I reached for the cabinet, took out the pills, placed them on the counter. Everything exactly as before. And then I slowed down. Not intentionally, not in a way I decided. It just happened. Like something in me was waiting. Not for instruction, for confirmation. I picked up the glass, held it in my hand, looked at the pills. And then, without realizing it, I looked at the table. At the empty space where breakfast would usually be. Because now, that space meant something. It hadn't before. Before, it was just part of the kitchen. Now, it was part of the decision. I stayed there for a few seconds longer than necessary, and in those seconds, something strange happened. I tried to remember, not what I was doing, what I had always done. The exact order. The exact sequence. Water, pills, coffee, I knew it. I had done it for years. But the memory felt less precise, less fixed, like something that had been clear before was now slightly blurred. Not gone, just less certain, and that uncertainty was new. I took the pills, same as before, water first, then coffee. But this time, when I swallowed them, it didn't feel automatic. It felt like a choice, like I had chosen one version over another, and that stayed. She came into the kitchen a few minutes later, same as always, same quiet entry, same presence. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I replied. I didn't mention anything. Not the hesitation, not the thought, not the change I wanted to see. She walked to the table, sat down, looked at me for a moment. Not long, just enough. Then, "Did you take your pills?" she asked. Same question, same tone, but now it landed differently. "Yes," I said, a pause. "With breakfast?" she asked. There it was again, that specific phrasing, that same structure. I shook my head. "No," she nodded. "I know." Always the same answer. Then she added, "You'll get used to it." Get used to it. The sentence stayed. Because now it wasn't just a suggestion anymore. It was an expectation. Something that would become normal. Something I would adapt to, without deciding. I didn't respond. I just poured my coffee, sat down across from her, and for a moment neither of us spoke. But the silence wasn't the same as before. Before it had been empty. Now it felt structured, like something had already been set in place. Later that morning, something else happened, not with the pills, with something smaller. Something that shouldn't have mattered at all. I was getting ready to leave, standing near the door, putting on my shoes. Same routine, same movements, keys on the table, phone next to them. Wallet in my pocket, always in the same order. I reached for my keys, and she said, "You usually grab your phone first." The sentence came out the same way as before, light, casual. Like it was already true, I stopped, not completely, just enough, because that didn't sound right. "I don't," I said. She tilted her head slightly. "You do." The confidence in her voice was subtle. Not strong, but enough. Enough to make me think. Enough to make me pause. I looked at the table, at the phone, at the keys, then at my hand. And for a moment I couldn't remember, not clearly. Not exactly. I knew I had a routine. I knew I followed it every day. but the order felt less certain, less defined, like something that had always been there was now slightly out of place. I've always done keys first, I said, but the sentence didn't feel as solid as it should have. She didn't argue. She didn't correct me, she just smiled, small, reassuring. Maybe, she said, maybe. The word stayed, because it changed everything. Not right, not wrong, just uncertain. I picked up the phone, then the keys, then stood there for a second longer than I needed to. Because now the action wasn't automatic anymore. It was observed, considered, measured. I left the apartment, closed the door behind me, walked down the hallway, but the thought followed me. You usually grab your phone first. Later that day, I tried to remember, not the action, the pattern, the way I always did it, and I couldn't. Not with certainty, not with clarity. I could imagine both versions. Keys first, phone first. Both felt possible, both felt familiar, and that was the problem, because routines aren't supposed to feel like that. They're supposed to be fixed, unquestioned, stable. But now there was doubt, small, quiet, but persistent, and that doubt didn't come from me, it came from something else. Something that had been placed there. Gently, carefully, without force. The next morning it happened again, not the same situation, something different. I was in the kitchen making coffee. Same routine, same movements. I reached for the mug and she said, "You usually rinse it first." I stopped, looked at the mug, then at the sink, then at her. "I always rinse it," I said. She nodded. "I know," then she added, "you didn't just now." I looked back at the mug, still in my hand, dry, untouched, and for a moment I wasn't sure, not because I didn't know. Because I had to think about it, and that had never happened before. I didn't rinse the mug, not right away. That was the first thing that felt different. Because before, if someone had said something like that, I would have either ignored it or corrected it without thinking. I would have said, "No, I always do," and moved on. Or I would have rinsed it automatically without noticing. But this time I paused. The mug stayed in my hand, dry, unmoved, and I looked at the sink, at the faucet. At the space where the action should have already happened. Because now, it wasn't just an action, it was something I had to confirm. "You didn't just now," she had said, not a question, a statement. And now I was checking, not the mug, myself. I turned on the water, let it run for a second, then rinsed the mug. Slowly, deliberately, not because I needed to, because I had been told I hadn't. I placed it on the counter, then looked at her. "I always rinse it," I said again. This time the sentence felt weaker, not wrong, just less certain. She nodded. "I know. And then, you just forgot this time." Forgot, there it was, a new word, a different direction, not slower, not different. Forgot. I stood there for a moment. Because that word changed something. Before it had been about habits, order, consistency. Now it was about memory, about something missing, about something that should have happened but didn't. "I didn't forget," I said. She didn't argue, she didn't insist. She just looked at me, calm, patient, like she was waiting for me to reach the same conclusion. "It's not a big deal," she said. And that was the part that stayed. Not a big deal, because that's how it works. It's never a big deal, not at first, not when it starts. It's just a small thing, a moment, a detail. Something you wouldn't normally think about, unless someone points it out, again, and again, and again. I made my coffee, sat at the table, tried to focus on something else, but the moment stayed. Not the action, the uncertainty. Did I rinse it? Did I forget? Had I always done it? Or had I just assumed I did? I couldn't answer that clearly, and that was new. Later that day, something else happened. I was in the living room, sitting on the couch, my phone in my hand. Scrolling. Not really paying attention, just passing time. She was sitting across from me. Watching something on her own phone, or at least it looked like she was. "You already checked that," she said. I looked up. "What?" "That message," she said, nodding slightly toward my phone. "You read it earlier," I frowned, because I didn't remember doing that. "I didn't," I said. She shrugged. "You did." The same structure, the same confidence, not strong, but enough. Enough to make me think. I looked back at the screen. At the message, tried to remember. Had I opened it before? Had I read it? Had I scrolled past it earlier without noticing? I couldn't be sure. Not completely. I don't think so, I said. She didn't push, didn't argue, just said, maybe you forgot. There it was again, the same word, placed in a different moment, a different context, but carrying the same meaning. I locked the phone, placed it on the table, because now it wasn't about the message. It was about the doubt. The small space between what I thought I knew and what she said. And that space was getting bigger. Not suddenly, not noticeably, just gradually. I stood up, walked to the kitchen. Needed movement, something physical, something certain. I opened the cabinet, looked at the plates, closed it again, because I wasn't actually doing anything. I was just checking. Checking that things were where they should be, that something hadn't changed, that I hadn't missed something else. Because now that was the pattern, not action, verification, not doing, checking. I leaned against the counter, tried to think back, to the morning, to the mug, to the pills, to the keys, each moment, each detail, each small correction, and I realized something. None of them had been wrong, not clearly, not provably, but none of them had been right either. They existed in between, in that space where you can't be completely sure, and that's where it works. Because if something is clearly wrong, you reject it. If something is clearly right, you accept it. But if it sits in between, you think about it, you question it, you adjust, slowly. Without noticing, I walked back into the living room. She was still there, same position, same calm presence, like nothing had happened, like nothing was happening. I sat down again. Didn't pick up my phone, didn't speak, just sat, and after a moment she said, "You've been a little distracted lately." The sentence was soft, careful, placed exactly where it needed to be. I looked at her, because now that word mattered, distracted, not forgetful, not confused, just distracted. "I'm fine," I said. She nodded. "I know," always the same answer. Always the same acknowledgement. Then, "I just think it would help if you paid a little more attention." Help, again, everything framed as help, everything positioned as something for me. I didn't respond, because now I wasn't sure what I was responding to. Her words, or the version of me she was building, and for the first time I realized something clearly. It wasn't just that she was changing small details. It was that those details were starting to change how I saw myself. I didn't answer her, not because I didn't know what to say. Because anything I said would place me somewhere inside what she had just defined. Distracted, more attentive, less attentive, all of it part of the same structure, so I stayed quiet. And that silence did something, not immediately, but gradually. It made the room feel different, not tense, not uncomfortable, just observed, like everything that happened next would be noticed. Measured, placed somewhere. She didn't push. She never did. That was the part that made it difficult. There was no pressure, no insistence, no argument, just presence, and that presence stayed. Even when nothing was being said. Later that afternoon, I went back into the kitchen, not because I needed anything, because I wanted to repeat something, something simple, something I knew. I picked up a glass, walked to the sink, turned on the water, and rinsed it. Slowly, deliberately, watched the water move across the surface, watched the drops slide down. Watched everything happen exactly the way I expected it to. Then I turned off the water, placed the glass on the counter, and waited, because now I was testing something, not the action. The certainty, she walked in a few seconds later, same timing, same quiet movement, and her eyes went to the glass, not to me, to the glass. "You didn't dry it," she said. I turned toward her. Looked at the glass, water still clinging to the sides, then back at her. "I don't always dry it," I said. She nodded. "I know. Then you usually do." Usually, another word, another layer. Not always, not never, somewhere in between. I looked at the towel, hanging next to the sink, then back at the glass, because now the action wasn't complete anymore. Not in my version, in hers. I reached for the towel, dried the glass, placed it back down. And as I did, I felt it. Not frustration, not anger, something else. Adjustment, small, quiet, but real. I had changed something. Not because I wanted to, because it had been pointed out. And once it was pointed out, it felt incomplete not to fix it. I stepped back from the counter. Because now that moment mattered more than the action itself. You see, she said, soft, almost reassuring. That's what I mean. I didn't respond, because now I didn't know what she meant. Not exactly. Improvement, correction, or something else entirely. I walked back into the living room, sat down again, picked up my phone, then put it back down, because now even that felt different. Even that felt like something that could be observed. You've been on your phone a lot today, she said. From across the room, I looked up, because that wasn't true. Or at least I didn't think it was. I haven't, I said. She tilted her head slightly. You have. Same tone, same certainty. I frowned, because now I needed to check. I opened the phone. Looked at the screen, tried to remember. When had I used it? How long? How often? The moments blurred together, not gone, just unclear. I don't think so, I said. She didn't argue, didn't insist. Just said, maybe it feels shorter than it is. That sentence stayed, because now it wasn't about what I did, it was about how I perceived it. Time, usage, attention. All of it something I might be misjudging. I locked the phone, placed it face down on the table, because now I didn't want to check, I didn't want to confirm, I didn't want to measure. I just wanted to stop, to sit, to exist without adjusting, without verifying, without questioning every small action. But even that didn't feel natural anymore. I sat there for a few minutes, doing nothing, and after a while she said, "You're being very quiet." I looked at her, because now even silence was something that could be observed, something that could be interpreted. "I'm just thinking," I said. She nodded. "I know," always the same answer. "Then you've been doing that a lot too." Thinking, another thing. Another observation. Another detail, placed into the same pattern. I leaned back slightly, closed my eyes for a second, because now it wasn't just actions, it wasn't just routines. It was everything. Everything I did was being noticed, framed, placed somewhere. And over time, those placements started to matter, more than the actions themselves. I opened my eyes again. Looked at her, then around the room, because now the space felt different. Not physically, structurally, like there was an invisible layer over everything. A version of events that existed alongside mine. And slowly, quietly, that version was starting to feel more stable than mine. And that was the part that didn't feel right. I didn't move for a while after that, not because I was tired, because I needed something to stay still, something that didn't change depending on how it was described. I looked at the table. At the surface, at the small scratch near the edge I had noticed years ago and then stopped seeing, it was still there, unchanged, untouched, certain. I focused on that. Because now certainty mattered, not in big things, in small ones, the ones that shouldn't shift, the ones that shouldn't require thought, the ones that just are. "You're doing it again," she said. I didn't look up. Doing what? Getting lost in something small. The sentence was soft, not critical, just observational. I lifted my gaze slowly, looked at her. Because now even that had a meaning. "You were staring at the table," she added. "I was just looking," I said. She nodded. "I know. Then you've been doing that more." More, another word. Another pattern. I leaned back slightly. Because now there was a rhythm to it, not just what she said, when she said it. After I did something, after I paused, after I hesitated. Each moment followed by an observation. Each observation placed into a pattern. And that pattern was becoming something else, something larger than the moments themselves. I stood up. Not suddenly, just deliberately, walked into the kitchen, because I needed to move, not to do something to break the sequence. I opened the cabinet, took out a plate, placed it on the counter. Then stopped, because now I was aware of it, every movement, every step. I picked up a glass, rinsed it, dried it, placed it next to the plate, then stepped back. Because now I was completing things, not because I needed to, because I didn't want to leave anything unfinished, anything that could be pointed out, anything that could be turned into another moment, another correction, another "you usually." I stood there for a few seconds, then she walked in. Same timing, same quiet presence. Her eyes moved across the counter. Plate, glass, towel, everything in place. "You didn't take anything out of the fridge," she said. I turned toward her, because now even completeness wasn't enough. There was always something else. I wasn't going to, I said. She nodded. I know. Then you usually do when you take a plate. Usually, again, I looked at the plate, at the empty surface. Then at the fridge, because now the action wasn't defined by what I intended. It was defined by what I had done before, or what she believed I had done before. I'm not hungry, I said. She smiled slightly. That's fine. A pause, then it's just different. Different, another word, not wrong, not right, just off. I walked past her, back into the living room. Because now staying in the kitchen felt like staying inside something. A sequence, a structure, a set of expectations. I sat down again, this time without thinking about it. Just sitting. Trying to let something be automatic, trying to let something exist without analysis. But even that didn't last. You sat in a different spot, she said. I looked down, at the couch. At the position, because now even that mattered. I just sat down, I said. She nodded. I know. Then you usually sit on the other side. I exhaled slowly. Because now there was no part of this that wasn't being mapped. Position, movement, timing, everything, and each one placed into the same pattern. You notice a lot, I said. The sentence came out quieter than I expected. She looked at me, not surprised, just calm. I pay attention, she said, pay attention, the same phrase she had used earlier. But now it meant something else. Not awareness, surveillance, not care, measurement. I leaned back, closed my eyes for a second, because now I needed to separate something. My actions from her descriptions of them, because they weren't the same anymore. They existed side by side. Two versions, mine and hers, and slowly her version was becoming more detailed. More structured, more cert, while mine was becoming less. More vague, more questioned, more unstable. I opened my eyes again, looked at her, because now I understood something clearly. This wasn't about small corrections, or suggestions, or better ways to do things. It was about replacing something, not physically, not visibly, quietly, step by step. Replacing my certainty with her version of it, and the more it happened, the harder it became to tell the difference. I stopped responding after that, not completely. Not in a way she could point to and say something was wrong. I still answered when she asked something directly, still nodded, still said okay when it fit, but I stopped engaging with the pattern. I stopped correcting her, stopped explaining, stopped trying to place my version next to hers, because every time I did, it turned into something else. Another detail, another comparison. Another small shift, and I needed something to stay untouched, so I let her speak, and I watched. That afternoon, she sat across from me again. Same place, same posture, same quiet presence. And I waited, because now I knew something would come, not immediately, not directly, but eventually, and it did. You didn't finish your coffee earlier, she said. I looked at the table. The cup was still there, half full. I hadn't noticed, or maybe I had and didn't think about it. I'll finish it later, I said. She nodded. I know, then you usually don't leave it like that. I didn't answer, because now I wasn't sure if that was true, or if it just sounded true. I picked up the cup, drank the rest. Not because I wanted to, because it felt incomplete not to. I placed it back down. Empty, finished, and as I did, I felt it again. That small adjustment, that quiet correction. That shift from action to response. She watched, not with satisfaction, not with approval, just observing, like she was confirming something, and that confirmation mattered, not to me, to her. You see, she said softly, and that sentence stayed. Because now it wasn't about what I did, it was about what she saw, and once she saw it, it became real. I stood up again. Walked into the kitchen, because now movement helped, not to escape, to reset. I opened the fridge, looked inside, closed it, because I wasn't actually looking for anything, I was checking. That the action itself still belonged to me, that it wasn't being guided, or measured, or corrected. She walked in a moment later, same timing, always the same. You already checked that earlier, she said. I turned toward her, because now that sentence mattered more than the others. What? The fridge, she said. You opened it not long ago. I frowned. Because I didn't remember doing that, not clearly. Maybe I had, maybe I hadn't, the moment didn't feel fixed. I don't think so, I said. She shrugged slightly. You did. Same structure. Same confidence. Not enough to prove anything, just enough to create doubt. I looked at the fridge, at the handle, at my hand still resting near it, because now the action itself didn't matter. The memory did, and that memory was no longer stable. I might have, I said, and as soon as I said it, I felt it. That shift, that small movement, from certainty to uncertainty. From I didn't to maybe, she nodded. I know, always the same answer, always that same quiet acknowledgement. Then it happens. The words were soft, almost comforting. But they landed differently. Because now, it happens didn't mean nothing. It meant something recurring, something expected, something that would continue. I leaned against the counter. Closed my eyes for a moment. Because now the pattern was complete. Not just actions, not just observations, memory, even memory was being adjusted. Not directly, not forcefully. Just gently questioned. And once something is questioned enough, it stops feeling certain. I opened my eyes again, looked at her. Because now, there was only one thing left to understand. Not what she was saying, why she was saying it. What are you trying to do? I asked. The question came out calm, not accusing, not emotional, just clear. She looked at me. And for the first time, she didn't answer immediately. Because now, there was no structure to fall back on. No pattern to repeat, just intention. I'm trying to help you stay consistent, she said. The same words, again, but now they didn't fit anymore. Because consistency doesn't replace memory, it doesn't change perception, it doesn't create doubt. I nodded slowly. Because now I understood something completely. This wasn't about making things better, or easier, or more consistent. It was about something else, something quieter, something deeper. And whatever it was, it had already started working. Not on what I did, on how I saw it. And that was much harder to stop. I didn't answer her right away. Not because I didn't have something to say, because I needed to hear what she had just said without reacting to it. I'm trying to help you stay consistent. The sentence sounded clean, reasonable. Like something that didn't need to be questioned. But it didn't match what I was feeling. Consistency doesn't make you doubt what you just did. It doesn't make you hesitate before doing something you've done for years. It doesn't make you check yourself after every small action. That's not consistency, that's something else. I pushed myself off the counter and walked back into the living room. Not quickly, not to leave, just to move the conversation somewhere else, because the kitchen had become something. A place where things were corrected, observed, adjusted. I needed distance from that. She followed a few seconds later. Same timing, always the same. I sat down, this time on the same spot as before. Not because I preferred it, because I wanted to remove that variable. She noticed, of course she did. You're sitting there again, she said. I nodded. Yes. No explanation, no adjustment. Just yes, she didn't say anything else. And that silence felt different, because for the first time, I wasn't reacting to her observation. I wasn't correcting it. I wasn't questioning it. I was just letting it exist. And that changed something, not in her, in me. I picked up my phone, unlocked it, looked at the screen, not because I needed to. Because I wanted to do something without thinking about it, without checking, without confirming. I opened a message, read it, closed it. Simple, automatic, or at least it should have been. You already read that, she said. The sentence came immediately. No pause, no hesitation. I didn't look up. I'm reading it again, I said. The words felt different, not defensive, just grounded. A statement, not a correction. She didn't respond. And that mattered, because now there was no adjustment from her, no follow-up. No, you usually, just silence. I locked the phone, placed it down. Then looked at her, because now this was the moment, not when she spoke, when she didn't. What happens if I don't change anything? I asked. The question stayed in the room, clear, unstructured. Unattached to any pattern, she looked at me, and for a second I saw something different, not certainty, not calm, something else. I don't understand, she said, and that was new. Because she always understood before, always had an answer, always had a way to place what I said inside something. I mean, I continued, What happens if I keep doing things the way I always have? She didn't answer immediately, because now there wasn't a simple version of that, not for her. You'll keep missing things, she said finally. Missing, another word, not forgetting, not delaying, missing. I nodded slowly, because now that was the core, not the actions, the outcome. The belief behind everything she had said. I leaned back slightly, looked around the room, because now I needed to place something clearly. Not her version, mine. I didn't miss anything, I said. Calm, clear, simple. She didn't respond, because now there was nothing to correct. Nothing to adjust, just a statement. I continued. I took my pills. I answered my messages. I made my coffee. I left the apartment. Each sentence grounded, each one certain, because I had done them, not thought about them, done them. And I remembered all of it, I added. Silence. Because now that part mattered, not the actions, the memory. I looked at her. Because now there was no pattern left to follow. Only truth. You're not helping me remember, I said. You're making me question it. The sentence landed differently. Not soft, not sharp, just exact. She blinked, just once. Because that wasn't something she had said before. Not something she had framed. Not something she could place easily. That's not what I'm doing, she said. But this time, the answer came slower. Less certain. I nodded. I know you don't think it is. And that was the difference, between intention and effect. I leaned forward slightly, because now this needed to be clear. Every time you say you usually, every time you say you forgot, every time you say you already did that, I paused, because the next part mattered more. I stopped trusting what I just did. Silence. Because now there was no way around it, no softer version, no alternative interpretation, just impact. She looked at me. And for the first time, she didn't look calm, not completely. There was something else, something uncertain, something shifting. I'm just trying to help, she said again, the same sentence. But now it sounded different, not like something certain, like something she needed to hold on to. I nodded slowly, because now I understood something clearly. This wasn't going to stop because I explained it, because I corrected it, because I resisted it. It had already changed something, in me, in how I moved, in how I thought, in how I remembered. And that meant one thing. If I wanted to stop it, I couldn't just respond to her. I had to stop responding to the version she was creating. And that was going to be much harder. I didn't say anything else after that, because there wasn't anything left to explain, not in words, not in a way that would change what had already happened. The room stayed quiet. But this time, the silence didn't feel observed. It felt empty, like something had finally stopped. She didn't speak, didn't correct, didn't add anything, and that was new. Because for the first time since this started, there was no second version of the moment, just mine. I stood up slowly, walked into the kitchen, not because I needed to. Because I wanted to do something simple, something I didn't have to think about. I picked up a glass, turned on the water, rinsed it, turned off the tap, placed it on the counter. And I didn't look at her. I didn't wait. I didn't check. I just did it. Then I dried it. Not because she had said anything, because I chose to. That difference mattered. I placed the glass down. Stepped back, and for a moment I paid attention to how it felt. Not the action, the certainty. It was there, quiet, unquestioned, untouched. And that was the first time in days that something felt completely mine. She walked into the kitchen a few seconds later. Same timing, same presence, but she didn't say anything. Her eyes moved across the counter, the glass, the towel, the space, and then she looked at me and waited. That was the difference. She waited, not for me to act, for me to react. For me to fill the silence. But I didn't. I turned, walked past her, back into the living room, sat down, same spot, same position, not because I was trying to be consistent, because I wanted to. I picked up my phone, unlocked it, opened a message, read it, closed it, placed the phone down, and I didn't look up. I didn't check her expression. I didn't wait for a correction. I didn't prepare a response. I just let the moment exist. A few seconds passed, then she said, "You didn't answer it." The sentence was softer than before, less certain. I looked at the phone. Then back at her. "I read it," I said. She nodded. "I know. A pause, then, you usually reply right away. I didn't move, didn't hesitate, didn't think. I'll answer it later, I said. And the sentence stayed. Because this time, it didn't come with doubt. It didn't come with hesitation. It didn't come with a second version. It just existed. She didn't respond immediately. Because now there was nothing to correct, nothing to adjust, nothing to place. She stood there for a moment longer. Then slowly she sat down, not across from me, next to me. That was new. Not close enough to feel intrusive, just different. I didn't mean to make you feel like that, she said. The words came quietly, carefully, like she was stepping into something unfamiliar. I looked at her because now this was the first sentence that didn't follow the pattern. You didn't notice, I said. She nodded. No, a pause. Then I thought I was helping. I nodded slowly. I know, and I meant it, because that had always been true, but it didn't change anything. Because what mattered was what she meant to do. It was what happened. I leaned back slightly. Looked around the room, because now everything felt different. Not physically, not visibly, just clearer. The second version was gone, not erased, not forgotten, just no longer active. And without it, everything else returned. Not perfectly, not immediately, but enough. Enough to feel stable, enough to feel certain, enough to feel like mine again. I stood up, walked to the door. Opened it slightly, let the air from the hallway move into the apartment, then closed it again. A small reset, a small boundary, not for her, for me. I turned back toward her. Because now there was one thing left to say, not to explain, to define. You don't speak for me, I said, calm, clear, simple. She nodded. Yes. No hesitation, no correction, no adjustment. Because now she understood. Not through the pattern, not through repetition, through consequence. I walked back to the table, picked up the glass, turned it slightly in my hand. Then placed it back down, because now that was enough. No correction, no confirmation, no second version, just the action, just the moment, just mine.